Hey guys, Tarke here, and today's video will be me running two maps, one map with arc traps, one map with lightning traps. We'll talk about the pros and cons of both. Now, I've chosen Jungle Valley as the map, and for the record, I'm just in like early red, so tier 8 is fine for this showcase. I chose Jungle Valley because it's a fairly even layout. One of the big differences between the two is one is better in tighter layouts, one is better in more open layouts. Jungle Valley seems like a good middle ground, and Jungle Valley has additional targets near the boss, which boosts arc damage, but not to an exceptional amount, which makes it an unfair comparison. So we'll start off running Lightning Trap, and then afterwards we'll run Arc Trap. Before we do, though, just very, very briefly, they're both level 19 gems, because that's what I currently have. And you can see, you know, this is the gem info. The art's a little bit of quality going in its favor, but that's fine. So right off the bat, why am I making this comparison? So I'm making this comparison because whenever I make a Trapper video, people say, Tarke, what a cheeky ghost, what about Arc Trap? And I always give my long write-up about it. I'm gonna say right now, I have an extreme bias against Arc Trap. Yes, against Arc Trap. So the reason why I have such a strong hatred, yeah, I'm going to go there, I have such strong hatred of Arc Trap, is Arc Trap is actually responsible for getting traps nerfed post-rework. And the problem is they reworked traps became strong, Arc Trap became broken because of the timing of a Arc buff around the same time. The way they decided to balance traps after Arc Trap being the best build in the game for a while was to nerf every single individual trap mechanic. Once that didn't work, they then nerfed arc traps, and then the mechanic was dead for a few leagues, and they had to then go back and individually buff up every single trap skill. And the cluster trap support gem, and the trap throw additional gloves, and the routing of our passive tree just never really recovered. And finally, on my rant, the other issue why I hate Arc Trap so much, and why I haven't actually played a full-on Arc Trap build since Incursion League, is I was playing traps pre the trap rework, and people talk about it being like a dead mechanic that no one plays now. There were like 2 people total who played traps pre-trap rework. I kept making videos about how cool it was, and everyone was like, Tarke, you're an idiot. Then they reworked the thing, and everyone's like, wow, Tarke, have you seen this really fun playstyle? It's so cool. You should play this. This is fun. It's the equivalent of, like, having a band that you really love that not many people know about, and you've spent, like, a year trying to get your mate to listen to this band, but they just keep ignoring you. And then, like, you don't see them for a bit. Next time you see them, like, yo, have you heard of this really cool band? They're sick. And you're like, bruh, I've literally spent an entire year trying to get you to listen to this band, and you just blew me off. And now you're like, oh, this band's cool. And it's like, you're happy because, yay, more people are enjoying something you're enjoying, but at the same time, you're like, screw you, dude. So anyway, so because of that, whenever anyone asks you about Arc Trap, I've kind of just been like, no, it's bad, or I've given a very short answer. So with this video, my goal and my hope is to give a very fair and balanced, unbiased take. Haunting Shadows, interesting. Ooh, Abyssal Depths, very nice. On Arc Trap, and hopefully give people like a fair representation of both abilities. So, Arc is a deceptively low damage skill, or deceptively high damage skill rather, when you look at it just from a gem point of view. It has not very great top end, and it has not very great damage effectiveness, and it has a 5% base crit. So a lot of people, when they see Arc, they don't actually see the full damage potential of Arc. So Arc has a mechanic where it gains 15% more damage for each remaining chain, because the issue that Arc has, or used to have, still does to a lesser extent, is... Ooh. Wow, okay, this is recording videos, OP. Is the fact that if you have 2 bosses next to each other, Arc does amazing damage. Oh, we got a Lich as well. This is shaping up. I'll have the chest, please. So if you've got 2 bosses next to each other, then it does really tasty damage because it can just chain bounce and forth and just kick loads of hits. But if you've only got one target alone by itself, you lose most of your damage scaling. So the way that GGG tried to combat this was adding the 15% more damage for each remaining chain line, which means the first hit hits very hard, so if there's nothing for Arc to chain from, it still has some scaling going for it. Now, this is an amazing thing, but also kind of a bad thing, and I'll explain why it's kind of a bad thing. It means that Arc's damage scaling, ooh, I shouldn't have dashed through that, is very dependent on having access to additional chains. So you get an additional chain at level 21, and you get an additional chain from the Helmenscharn. Now, in a trade league environment, or not in a league start environment, this is perfectly fine, because you have access to those, gems. You can get 21 gems, not too difficult, and you can get access to Helmenscharns. If you're, not got much currency going on, or whatever reason, SSF, then it's not that attractive because a lot of your damage comes from Helmenscharn plus level 21 gem. Because not only do you just gain more damage with a level 21 compared to level 20 gem, but the difference between having Helmenscharn and 21 and not is 30% more damage. And that's not even factoring in the map clear bonuses of having additional chains, and also not factoring in the fact that when you have two bosses next to each other, there's also the additional hit from it chaining a final time. Then there's also the fact that with traps, we throw 3, not 1. So then that 2 chains is actually a difference of 6 chains across each right click. So it's very dependent on having it. Now you can see that as both a strength or a weakness. You can see it as a strength in the, well, this ability has access to this additional layer of scaling that Lightning Trap does not, because Lightning Trap doesn't have like an amazingly powerful offensive Helmenscharn, and it doesn't have access to a really good bonus level 21. It just gains more damage, which is fine, but it's just more damage. So if you have access to that stuff, Arc, things are looking pretty tasty. The other thing, which is both a good and a bad thing for Arc, is Arc doesn't have very good damage effectiveness. I believe it's only 70%, which is adequate, but it's nothing amazing. Most inherent trap abilities have very high damage effectiveness. Now, this is obviously very strong, because added damage is a great source of damage. The reason why this is both a potentially good thing, even though you're comparing I believe a 70% to a 170% damage effectiveness, is you generally want to use the Lightning Spire traps in a Lightning Trapper. And Lightning Spire Trap only has a damage effectiveness of 60%, if I believe. So this makes running flat damage less effective if you're splitting your damage equally between both a Lightning Spire Trap and a Arc or Lightning Trap. So let's say hypothetically that you're running like 2 6-links, maybe you're using like a staff, maybe you're using like shapeless items, you get the point, right? In that case, you'd actually be better off, if you're trying to scale both equally, in having, in having percent increased damage, crit multi, sort of generic, just like damage scaling things. Whereas if you're not worried about that stuff, and you're just trying to get the most raw damage potential possible on an ability like Lightning Trap, you would actually like to have quite a large focus on raw added damage to spells. So that's one thing. You could make the argument that Lightning Trap is dependent on Pierce, since we did just have a big thing about how Arc is dependent on chains. Well, it's a very easy problem to solve. So you can get a Helmenscharn, which gives 3 Pierce, which feels much less mandatory than the Arc +1 chain enchant, and you can spend 4 skill points to gain, a little bit of damage and 3 Pierce right here. Also, you could be like, well, in that case, that's great because Arc Trap saves skill 4 points. Well, no, because if you're playing Arc Trap, you actually really want to invest into these 2 nodes, which gives 30% increased chaining range. It's actually quite noticeable. The one good thing about this is it means it's very easy to swap between, and you end up saving 1 net skill point between the 2, if you're going to do a direct comparison like that. So, let's quickly pop this of our reliquary key, see what we get, and then we will run the Arc Trap map. So you're like, okay, it seems like there's not that much going for Arc Trap in the comparison here. It seems to be that you're leaning more towards Lightning Trap. Well, I'm going to do a little bit more leaning towards Lightning Trap, and then we'll try and convince you to go the other way. So the other thing that Lightning Trap really has going for it is its crit chance. So it has the higher base crit chance, 1%, which makes quite a big difference. And it has the increased critical strike chance against shocked enemies, which is really strong. So it has the 1% higher base crit, and it has this additional big chunk of crit. And that then makes a real big difference. It is much easier to get comfortable crit values. It is much easier to get crit capped with Lightning Trap than it is on Arc Trap. Trap Gloves. Dream Fragments is a fun item. Okay, I can take a fancy looking Dream Frags. Good rolled one as well. Nice on the cold res. Yeah, I use Dream Frags in a lot of builds. Yeah, I can take that. I'm happy with that one. Okay, so, all right, let's do the Arc Trap thing. Now, let's get into some of the bonuses that Arc Trap has over Lightning Trap. Now, they both have Vile skill variants. This is also, like many things in PoE, a good and a bad thing. It means that it's actually harder to get the level 21 versions of the gem. Put in another just clean Jungle Valley. Vile Arc, if you do get your hands on a level 21 Vile Arc, Vile Arc has a little bit more fanciness factor going for it compared to Lightning Trap. Vile Lightning Trap just does more damage. That is the advantage of Vile Lightning Trap. It just does a lot more damage. Actually, quite a noticeable a lot more since they buffed it last patch. And I believe it also has better uptime. But Vile Arc is really good for stuff like Legions. And also, you might notice from this, Arc has cleaner visuals. So a lot of people find Lightning Trap very busy visually, and they also really don't like the sound effect of it. And a lot of people consider the MTX for Lightning Trap apps actually mandatory. So if you're someone who can't stand the visuals, well then this is, you know, a much more pleasant experience. But this is where we kind of get into the problems. So generally, Lightning Trap, you're like, oh, that's pretty good clear. This is a map which doesn't really even, doesn't really favor one either way. But if you haven't got enough damage, and this is something that you can brute force with gear, but if you haven't got enough damage that each individual chain kills the enemy, which it's much easier to get each individual Lightning Trap hit kills the enemy because of the damage difference and the crit difference. Then what will often happen is when you get a lot of enemies, and I don't know if you're aware of this, but Ultimatum just throws a lot of enemies at you, you end up getting most of your chains eaten up by fodder mods. And this can also be very frustrating when you have stuff like allies cannot die totems. Then it can get really tedious. When you have one core target that has to die, well, then you're kind of screwed. Because you have zero control over it. You could argue that you have zero control over your Lightning Trap damage. You just throw it and a volley of damage comes out. No, because you have Pierce and you throw so many projectiles, you just throw it at the thing that you want to die and it dies. Whereas with the Arc, if you've got two high priority bosses next to each other, it could just bounce back and forth endlessly to the random trash mobs. Now again, as I said, the more chains you have, the less of an issue this is. And the more damage you have, the less likely you are to just have hits be eaten up. But there's actually a surprising amount of bosses, maps, mechanics in the game which just have fodder mobs, or in the case here, just a lot of mobs where suddenly it just feels much weaker. Trying not to use Lightning Splash Trap too much because then it's a Lightning Splash Trap showcase, but we'll just dump it out here since everything is stacked out. So you have the Beyond boss, which just dumps loads of SRS on the floor, which is really frustrating with Arc because the little SRS will just eat up everything. You have lots of random mechanics which will do stuff like animate weapons. You have the Conquerors, which regularly spawn little baby mobs. The Totems are a good example of that, so on and so forth. So I think it should be pretty clear from that just when it comes to incredibly dense League mechanics, Lightning Trap is significantly better. And it just comes down to a number of hits. So with Lightning Trap, you just put out so many individual little lightning balls that when you then factor in your you know, all the available targets and the pierce, it's basically impossible not to hit the thing. Whereas it is very, very possible not to hit the thing with Arc. I also think that Arc is better suited if you want to go for a more even split of your damage with the Lightning Spire Trap. And you can see that that boss was basically just Lightning Spire Trap. I didn't even really throw that many Arcs out for that one. Level 91, very nice. So in that case, you know, you could maybe make it an argument where you run a setup of maybe you run, if you're only got like 1 6 link and then maybe like a 5 link if you're using shaper items. Maybe you run your Arc Traps in the 5 link and you run your Lightning Spire in the 6 link. That could be a possible option. Is also worth considering that I am playing a Raider, not a Saboteur. The Saboteur Ascendancy does more damage. The Raider is significantly faster, and I'm playing it in hopes of getting the Incursion Trapper Gloves to convert all of my onslaught scaling into trap throwing speed. So my Ascendancy does actually favor Lightning Trap over Arc Trap, because if I was going for a hit hard, hit once setup, rather than a throw lots of things setup, then, you know, Arc would have less or wasted hits, so to speak. Both very much work. The other thing, obviously, that comes into question is, well, Lightning Trap is just 1 gem. Like, it's just 1 gem. Whereas with Arc, you need 2 gems. You need Arc, and you need the Trap Support Gem. Now, I hate on the Trap Support Gem a lot because it used to give a really nice more where it doesn't anymore. But if you're someone who uses charge traps in your main setup, which most trappers do use now, then actually it's not that bad of a comparison. So charge trap gives you some crit multi per power charge, so it gives you a nice little chunk of damage even without investing into power charges, so that's good. And it gives you 10% increased trap throwing speed per frenzy charges. So if you have a base of just 3 frenzy charges, that's 30% trap throwing speed. Trap support gives some trap damage, and it gives trap throwing speed base, and the quality gives an additional 10% trap throwing speed. You don't need to have any divergent, you don't need to waste any time heisting, trying to get particular fancy ones. Just a core 20-20 trap support will give you 29% increased trap throwing speed, which is basically the same as a charge traps. Now, charge trap is still more damage because you're getting the crit multi and you have the option to scale it further with additional frenzy charges, but on a base value, it's not that uncharitable of a comparison. However, with a inherent trap skill, you have the option to drop charge traps when it matters, like when you're bossing, for a heavier single damage link. And this is especially true in trade leagues, where you then have access to, you know, woke gems. When you have the option of like swapping out charge traps for a big woke gem, well, then the damage difference becomes very noticeable between the setups. Now, with all that being said, you can kind of just make either work. It isn't the end of the world if you love one and hate the other. And it can just be fun to explore new setups. And I also implore you guys to check your biases, because I know, at least since Incursion League, because I hate Arc Trap so much, whenever anyone has asked me about Arc Trap, I've never really, you know, given the full proper response, which is what I'm hoping this video is. And I spent all of level 89 to 91 playing Arc Trap. I forced myself to play it for a few levels, and I was doing it with the chaining range spec 10, and even after all that, I do definitely prefer Lightning Trap, especially in this league. In a different league environment where it wasn't that dependent on, you know, surviving these massive hordes of monsters, you know, I would definitely feel, you know, a better Arc Trap. Like if this was Legion League, I'd be like, Arc Trap, let's go. If it was a meta where I was running lots of tight indoor maps where Arc Trap really shines over Lightning Trap in indoor maps, then I'd be like, cool, let's go. But for most maps, it will feel roughly the same. I would give the advantage to Lightning Trap, league mechanics aside. But maps which are bad, there isn't really a map type which is bad for Arc Trap, but there are map types which are bad for Lightning Trap, which would be lots of very small enclosed rooms with lots of terrain to eat up your hits. That being said, with Lightning Trap, you do have just so many projectiles that you brute force it. One final thing I'll say before I wrap up this video is talking about mark skills. Lightning Trap kind of wants to use, not kind of, Lightning Trap is very much favored to use Sniper's Mark. I always call it projectile weakness. Sniper's Mark gives the most damage of any individual mark or curse skill in the game if you can scale it, but that only scales the Lightning Trap. If you're doing a build which has like an even-ish split, or at least a large focus on Lightning Spire Trap, then you'd rather run Assassin's Mark. Whereas with Arc, you only really have Assassin's Mark or Conductivity. So you could see this as both a pro and a con. You could say this is a pro for Lightning Trap because it has an additional very strong option. Or you could see it as a con that its best option doesn't really lean itself to Lightning Spire Trap. And you might have generally heard from this video that it seems like if you want to do a very even split, then Arc wins some points. Lightning Trap wins points if you want to do a pure Lightning Trap build. A lot of people prefer to use less buttons, so I'd probably consider that just a win to Lightning Trap, because I think it is easier to do a pure Lightning Trap build than it is to do a pure Arc build. But you can make everything work in Path of Exile if you just throw enough gear at it. But yes, I'm Tarke. Have a good day. Let me know what you think, by the way. Oh, and Tarke, what about Ball Lightning Trap, though? Bye-bye.